Beneath the fractured moon, a single snowflake clung to her eyelash like a tear frozen in time. Alara stumbled through the whispering pines, her breath a ragged ghost in the iron grip of winter. The wind clawed at her threadbare cloak, tearing at the edges as if the forest itself conspired to strip her bare. She had been Liran's mate once, marked, claimed, the Omega whose scent had woven through the pack's halls like wild honey. But betrayal had a sharper fang than any wolf's. His eyes, once soft with possession, had hardened under the council's gaze, his voice a blade when he uttered the words, "You are no longer mine. Exile claims you." No reason given, only the ritual scar on her wrist, a silver locket that burned cold against her skin, its lunar crescent etched with the pack's ancient vow. It was the symbol of her bond, now a mocking weight, heavy with the blood of promises broken. The snow fell thicker now, blanketing the world in a hush that amplified her solitude. Her bare feet bled into the white, each step a crimson bloom that the cold swiftly erased. The mountains loomed like silent judges, their peaks crowned in ice that gleamed under the moon's indifferent light. She had been left at the border at dusk, the pack's howls fading behind her like a dirge. No provisions, no farewell, only the wind's howl and the distant rumble of thunder that spoke of storms unborn. Alara's body ached from the forced march, her Omega instincts screaming for shelter, for the warmth of a den that no longer existed. But deeper than the chill was the wound in her chest, a hollow where Liran's touch had once anchored her soul. She collapsed against a jagged rock, the stone biting into her palms like accusation. Why? The question echoed in her mind, a relentless tide. Whispers in the pack had swirled for moons, rumors of her weakness, an Omega who dreamed too vividly, who saw shadows in the flames that others dismissed as tricks of the fire. But Liran, her Alpha King, had sworn to protect her. He ruled the Frostfang realm with a fist of steel and a heart burdened by the ghosts of wars past, his own scars hidden beneath regal furs. Yet in the great hall, under the eyes of the elders, he had turned away. "The pack demands purity," he had said, his voice cracking like thin ice. Had guilt twisted him so? Or was it fear? Of her, of what she stirred in the quiet hours when his crown felt like chains. The locket swung free as she curled into herself, its chain tangled in her dark hair. Inside, a lock of his fur, silvered by age, pressed against her thumb. She traced the crescent moon engraved on its surface, a symbol of the goddess who wove fates under lunar threads. Legend spoke of Omegas marked by such talismans, bearers of hidden paths, but Alara had never felt the pull of destiny, only the sting of rejection. The wind carried a faint weevo, distant and mournful, stirring the hairs on her neck. Was it the wild wolves or something more? Her senses sharpened, the Omega in her attuned to the night's pulse, the metallic tang of blood on the breeze, the crackle of unseen flames. Hours blurred into a numb vigil. The cold seeped into her bones, painting her lips blue, but she refused to yield. Strength, she thought, was not the roar of an alpha, but the quiet defiance of survival. What is redemption, if not rising from the snow you were buried in? Her fingers numbly clutched the locket, its edges cutting into her flesh, a small pain to drown the greater one. The moon climbed higher, casting silver veins across the forest floor, illuminating a path she had not seen before. Or had she? In her fevered haze, the trees seemed to part, revealing a faint glow amid the white expanse. Then, a shadow detached from the gloom, not a wolf, but a figure, broad and stumbling, his silhouette etched against the lunar glow. He moved like a wounded beast, one arm clutched to his side, dark blood staining the snow in his wake. Ilara's heart stuttered, instinct flooding her veins with wary fire. Friend or foe? The air thickened with his scent, pine and smoke. laced with the raw edge of alpha dominance, yet undercut by something broken, like a throne toppled in silence. He collapsed mere paces away, his breath a guttural rasp that shattered the night's quiet. She should have fled. The exile's code was clear: trust no one beyond the border. But the locket warmed against her chest, an impossible heat blooming from its core, as if the moon herself urged her forward. Curiosity warred with fear, her omega nature drawn to the wounded like moths to flame. He lifted his head, eyes the color of storm clouds meeting hers, and in that gaze she saw not conquest, but a mirror of her own shattering. Who was this stranger, this alpha whose presence unraveled the solitude she had claimed? The wind howled louder, carrying the echo of pursuing howls, enemies perhaps, or echoes of the pack that had cast her out. Alara's hand trembled as she reached toward him, the locket's chain glinting like a lifeline in the dark. In that moment, under the fractured moon, exile became encounter, and the first thread of an unforeseen bond began to weave. Ilara's fingers hovered in the frigid air, inches from the stranger's bloodied shoulder, as if the night itself held her back. The locket pulsed against her skin, a rhythmic warmth that defied the encroaching frost, urging her onward like a whispered incantation from the goddess. His eyes, turbulent as winter seas, locked onto hers, not with the predatory gleam of a conqueror, but with a raw vulnerability that mirrored the chasm in her own soul. Blood seeped from a gash across his ribs, staining the snow in dark, blooming petals, and the scent of it mingled with the sharp pine of his essence, stirring something primal within her. An alpha, yes, but broken. His broad frame slumped against the earth like a fallen oak. Who are you? His voice was a gravelly murmur, laced with pain and suspicion as he tried to push himself upright. The effort drew a hiss from his lips, his hand pressing futilely against the wound. Snowflakes caught in his disheveled hair, black as raven wings, and a faint scar traced his jawline, silvered by moonlight, a mark of battles long endured. Ilara swallowed, her throat dry as ash. Exile had taught her caution, yet the locket's heat spread through her veins, thawing the ice around her heart. "No one," she whispered, her voice trembling like the wind through the pines. "Just a shadow, like you." She glanced over her shoulder, the distant howls growing insistent, a chorus of pursuit that clawed at the edges of the forest. They were coming, hunters, perhaps from a rival pack, or worse, echoes of her own forsaken kin. The air thickened with their menace, carrying the acrid bite of torch smoke on the breeze. He followed her gaze, his body tensing despite the agony. "They're after me," he rasped, forcing himself to his knees. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. The corded muscles beneath his torn cloak spoke of a warrior's life, yet his eyes held the weight of a crown too heavy to bear. "Betrayers, if they find you with me." He trailed off, shame flickering in his storm-gray depths. The howls sharpened, closer now, slicing through the night's veil. Alara's pulse thundered in her ears, her omega instincts warring, flee alone or bind her fate to this enigma. The locket burned hotter, its chain a tether pulling her toward him. Without another thought, she grasped his arm, her touch igniting a spark that made him flinch. "Then we run," she said, the words surprising even her. Strength was not solitude, but this fragile alliance forged in desperation. He nodded, grim determination etching his features, and together they staggered into the denser thicket. The forest swallowed them, branches whipping at their faces like vengeful spirits, the snow crunching underfoot in frantic rhythm. Ilara supported his weight as best she could, her smaller frame straining against his bulk, the metallic tang of his blood soaking into her cloak. Each step sent jolts of pain through her blistered feet, but the shared burden dulled the edge of her isolation. Behind them, the howls fractured into snarls, the crash of underbrush signaling the hunter's approach. shadowy figures with eyes like embers, their breaths fogging the air. They burst into a narrow ravine, its walls sheer cliffs of ice-veined stone that funneled the wind into a howling gale. Ilara's lungs burned, the cold a blade in her chest, but she spotted a crevice ahead, a shallow cave mouth yawning like the maw of some ancient beast. "There!" she gasped, pulling him toward it. He stumbled, nearly dragging her down, but she held firm, her hand on his back a steady anchor amid the chaos. Inside, the cave offered meager sanctuary, a low ceiling dripping with meltwater, walls etched with frost that glittered under stray moonbeams filtering through cracks above. They collapsed against the rear wall, the Alpha's labored breaths echoing in the dim confines. Ilara tore a strip from her cloak, pressing it to his wound with trembling hands. The fabric darkened instantly, absorbing the crimson flow, and as her fingers brushed his skin, a shiver passed between them, not from the cold, but something deeper, an instinctive pull that made her cheeks flush. He watched her, his gaze softening from wariness to quiet wonder. "You risk everything for a stranger," he murmured, his voice steadier now, though pain threaded through it like veins of ore. "Why?" The locket rested heavy between her breasts, its lunar crescent catching a sliver of light, casting ethereal patterns on the cave floor. Ilara met his eyes, seeing the guilt etched there, the same shadow that had haunted Liran's face before he cast her out. "Because I've known exile," she replied softly, her words weaving through the drip of water and the muffled howls outside. "And because the moon doesn't abandon the wounded." Her touch lingered on his chest, tracing the edge of the wound, and he inhaled sharply, not from pain, but from the gentleness she offered unbidden. Outside, the hunters prowled, their torches flickering like malevolent stars against the snow. Shadows danced on the cave walls, the wind carrying snippets of their guttural commands, seeking the Alpha fugitive, the king who had defied some ancient pact. Ilara's heart clenched. He was no mere warrior, but a ruler marked by betrayal, his flight a testament to choices that scarred deeper than any blade. Empathy bloomed in her chest, fragile as a flame in the gale, transforming fear into a tentative bond. She leaned closer, sharing her warmth against the unrelenting chill, their breaths mingling in the confined space. As the night deepened, the howls receded, thwarted by the ravine's labyrinth, but the danger lingered like a specter. In the hush that followed, he reached for her hand, his calloused fingers enveloping hers with a reverence that belied his strength. "Thorn," he said at last, his voice a low rumble. "My name is Thorn, Alpha King of the ironclad clans." The confession hung between them, heavy with implication, and Ilara felt the locket stir again, as if the goddess herself wove their threads tighter. In that fragile refuge, amid the scent of blood and frost-kissed stone, the first embers of trust kindled. Yet doubt whispered in her mind. Could she heal what was so profoundly broken? Or would this encounter shatter her anew? The moon's light faded, leaving them in twilight intimacy, two exiles bound by the night's unforgiving mercy. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The cave's chill wrapped around Ilara like a shroud, its stone walls exhaling breaths of ancient frost that prickled her skin. She sat close to Thorn, their bodies a fragile barrier against the night's unrelenting bite. The locket's warmth now a faint echo against her chest, as if the moon had withdrawn her favor to test their resolve. His wound had slowed its bleeding under her makeshift bandage, but the air hung heavy with the coppery scent of it, mingling with the damp earthiness of the cavern and the faint, wild musk of his alpha presence. Outside, the wind moaned through the ravine, a dirge that carried the fading snarls of the hunters, their torches long extinguished like dying stars. Thorn's hand still clasped hers, his grip loose yet unyielding, calluses rough as weathered bark against her palm. In the dimness, his face was a map of shadows. High cheekbones etched with exhaustion, eyes like forged steel, reflecting the scant light that seeped through the crevice. He had spoken his name like a confession, heavy with the crown it implied, and Alara felt the weight of it settle in her bones. An Alpha King. Felled by betrayal, his flight a unraveling of realms she could scarcely fathom. Yet in his gaze she saw no demand for submission, only a quiet unraveling, the guilt of a ruler who had failed his own code. "You shouldn't have helped me," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone between them. Pain laced each word, but so did something softer, a vulnerability that made her Omega instincts stir, protective and wary. He shifted slightly, wincing as the movement tugged at his wound, and Alara instinctively pressed her hand firmer against the bandage, feeling the heat of his skin beneath the cloth. The contact sent a tremor through her, not fear, but a spark of recognition. The locket pulsed once, sharply, as if echoing the beat of his heart. "And leave you to the snow?" she replied, her tone steadier than she felt. The cave's confines amplified her words, turning them intimate, almost sacred. She pulled back slightly, studying him, the scar along his jaw catching a stray beam of moonlight like a silver vein. It spoke of old wars, of blades that had kissed his flesh and left their mark. Much like the ritual scar on her wrist, a twin to the one Liren had inflicted in rejection. "Exile teaches you the cost of indifference. I've paid it once already." Thorn's eyes darkened, storm clouds gathering in their depths. He released her hand slowly, as if reluctant to sever the thread, and leaned his head back against the wall, the motion exposing the column of his throat, corded with tension. "Ironclad clans. My clans," he said, the words bitter as bile. "I forged them from blood and oath, led them through the long winter when rivals tore at our borders. But the council, my own betas, whispered of weakness. A king who hesitates, who spares lives when the old laws demand slaughter." His fingers flexed, tracing an invisible pattern on his knee, and Alara wondered at the ghosts that haunted him, the choices that had carved such melancholy into his soul. The wind outside surged, rattling loose stones from the entrance, and Alara tensed, her ears straining for the return of howls. But only silence followed, broken by the distant drip of melting ice, a rhythmic pulse like the goddess's own heartbeat. She drew her knees to her chest, the locket slipping free to dangle between them, its crescent moon glinting accusingly. Inside, the lock of Liran's fur felt like a betrayal now, a relic of a bond shattered under political games she had never understood. "What did you hesitate for?" she asked softly, curiosity overriding caution. In the refuge's hush, truths felt safer to unearth, like roots probing frozen soil. Thorn's gaze fixed on the locket, his brow furrowing as if it whispered secrets to him. "A village on the border," he confessed, voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "Omegas and pups, caught in the crossfire of a rival's raid. The law said raise them to send a message, strength through fear. But I saw my own losses mirrored there. A mate, taken by fever years ago, her eyes like yours in the firelight." He paused, the admission hanging raw between them, and Alara's breath caught. Guilt, she recognized it, the same shadow that had eclipsed Liran's love, turning protection to abandonment. "I ordered mercy. They called it treason. Now the hunters are my brothers in arms, twisted by ambition." Empathy swelled in her chest, warm against the cave's cold, transforming the instinctive pull into something deeper, a bridge over the chasm of their wounds. She reached out again, her fingers brushing his scarred jaw, tentative as a snowflake's touch. Thorn stilled, his breath hitching, knees drawing inward as if her gentleness buckled the iron resolve of a king. The locket warmed fiercely then, its heat spreading like liquid fire through her veins. and visions flickered at the edges of her mind, unbidden, sharp as shattered ice. She saw paths unfolding in the snow, a silver trail leading through mountains, flanked by wolves with eyes of moonlight, and at its end, a throne wreathed in flames, not of destruction, but renewal. Alara gasped, pulling her hand away, the images dissolving like mist. Her heart raced, the cave spinning in a haze of revelation. What was this? The dreams she had once dismissed as weakness, the shadows in the flames that had branded her unfit. Were they gifts? The locket thrummed, its chain alive against her skin, and Thorn's eyes widened, sensing the shift in her scent, the bloom of something ancient and untamed. "You felt it," he said, not a question, but awe threading his voice. He leaned forward despite the pain, his hand covering hers where it rested on her knee. The pull. It's no coincidence. The goddess marks her pathfinders with such signs, omegas who see the hidden ways, who guide the lost through storm and betrayal. Doubt warred with wonder in Alara's soul, the weight of destiny pressing like the cave's ceiling. She had been cast out for these visions, labeled a curse by Liran's court. Yet here, in this shadowed sanctuary, with an alpha whose guilt mirrored her pain, they felt like purpose. The wind outside softened to a sigh, as if the night approved, and in the silence, their bond deepened. Not in passion's rush, but in the quiet forging of trust, where fear yielded to fragile hope. But as the first hints of dawn grayed the crevice, distant howls stirred anew, closer, hungrier. The refuge had bought them time, but the world beyond demanded confrontation. Alara met Thorn's gaze, the locket's warmth a beacon in her chest, and knew that whatever paths lay ahead, she could no longer walk them alone. Strength, she realized, was not enduring isolation, but choosing to heal another's fracture, even as your own bled. Dawn's pale fingers clawed at the cave's mouth, bleeding gray light into the shadows where Alara and Thorn huddled, their breaths sinking in the thinning chill. The locket lay exposed on her chest, its silver crescent humming with an inner fire that no frost could quench, as if the moon had lodged a fragment of herself in its heart. Alara's mind reeled from the visions, those fleeting paths of silver snow, wolves with luminous eyes guiding toward a throne aflame with possibility. Her hand trembled in Thorn's grasp, the warmth of his skin a stark contrast to the stone's bite, and she felt exposed, as if the goddess had stripped her bare to reveal bones she had long buried under layers of shame. The distant howls sharpened, no longer echoes but harbingers slicing through the ravine's veil, pulling her from the haze. Thorn's body tensed beside her, his wound a dull throb he ignored, his free hand instinctively reaching for a phantom blade at his belt. "They're closing in," he growled, the alpha in him rising like a storm front, eyes narrowing to slits of forged steel. Yet beneath the resolve, guilt flickered, a king's burden, the weight of clans fracturing under his mercy. He squeezed her hand, not in command, but plea. "We can't stay, but you. Those visions. Tell me what you saw." Alara's throat tightened, the cave's damp air clinging to her like doubt. She had hidden these glimpses her whole life, dismissed them as fever dreams by Liran's court, the very shadows that had branded her unworthy. The rejection scar on her wrist itched, a twin to the locket's chain, both mocking her frailty. But here, in this earthen womb, with an alpha whose melancholy mirrored her exile, the words spilled forth like blood from a fresh cut. "Paths," she whispered, her voice threading through the drip of meltwater. "Silver trails through the mountains. Wolves at their edges, not hunters, but guardians. They led to fire, not ruin, but rebirth. A throne, wreathed in it, waiting." Thorn's breath caught, his gaze locking on the locket as if it were an oracle's eye. The light caught its surface, casting lunar fractals across his scarred jaw, illuminating the ancient lines etched there. marks of oaths sworn under similar moons. He released her hand slowly, reverently, and leaned closer, the scent of pine and blood intensifying, wrapping around her like a cloak woven from his essence. "Pathfinder," he murmured, the word a sacred invocation, heavy with the lore of their world. The goddess's chosen Omega, bearer of the hidden ways. Legends speak of them in whispers, women who see beyond the veil, who unravel destiny's knots when alphas like me are blinded by blood and crown. Her heart stuttered, the locket pulsing in rhythm, its heat blooming through her ribs like dawn's first warmth. Doubt clawed at her. Was this madness, or the truth Liren had feared? The wind outside surged, carrying the crunch of paws on snow, the hunter's snarls weaving through the gale like threads of fate tightening. Ilara rose unsteadily, pulling Thorn with her, his weight leaning into her side, a vulnerability that buckled her own knees. They crept toward the crevice, the cave's chill yielding to the outer world's bite, where mist coiled like spirits roused from slumber. Peering out, Ilara's breath fogged the icy air, her eyes tracing the ravine's contours. The visions resurfaced, sharper now, unbidden. The silver path unfurling from their feet, snaking upward through jagged peaks, away from the encroaching shadows of torchlight flickering in the distance. Wolves, ethereal, their fur dusted with frost, flanked it, eyes glowing like captured stars, urging her forward. "This way," she said, certainty flooding her veins, the locket's chain alive against her skin, guiding like a compass forged in moonlight. She pointed to a narrow ledge hidden by overhanging ice, invisible to all but her gifted sight. Thorn followed her gaze, seeing only stone and peril, but trust etched his features, softening the king's hard lines. "You are the key," he said, voice rough with awe and the edge of pain as he pressed a hand to his bandaged side. Blood seeped anew, staining the cloth crimson, a vivid slash against the white world. My destiny was sealed in betrayal, council turning blade on blade, clans splintering under my hesitation. But your sight cuts through the storm. The ironclad need a pathfinder to mend what I've broken, to lead us not to war's maw, but to renewal. The words struck her like wind-lashed snow, stirring the hollow in her chest where Liren's rejection had carved its void. She had been no one, an Omega cast adrift, her dreams a curse. Yet Thorn saw her as salvation, his guilt transforming into a bridge, his melancholy a call she could no longer ignore. The locket warmed fiercely, visions cascading. Him upon that fiery throne, not alone, but with her at his side, paths converging in a union of mercy and might. Her hand found his face, fingers tracing the scar, and he knelt slightly, knees buckling under the weight of her touch, not submission, but surrender to the pull between them. In that instant, the bond ignited, instinctive and profound, her Omega essence weaving with his alpha fire. Resisted no longer, but the howls crested, beasts bursting from the mist below, rival wolves, their eyes ember red, led by a beta whose fur bore the ironclad crest twisted by treason. Arrows whistled, one grazing Thorn's arm, drawing fresh blood that splattered the snow like accusatory petals. Ilara's gift surged, the silver path blazing in her mind, and she yanked him onto the ledge, their bodies slipping on ice-slick stone. The wolves below snarled, scaling the walls with feral grace, the air thick with the tang of pursuit and the moon's fading silver. They fled upward, the path unfolding as promised. A treacherous climb where wind howled like vengeful spirits, snow stinging their faces, each step a defiance of the abyss below. Thorn's breaths came ragged, his wound sapping strength, but he matched her pace, his hand never leaving hers. "You've saved me twice now," he panted, gray eyes meeting hers amid the gale, realization dawning like the sun's reluctant rise. not just from blades, but from the dark I carried alone. You are my revelation, Ilara, the Omega who turns guilt to grace. Her name on his lips was a balm, the locket's heat a steady flame against the storm. As they crested a ridge, the path widening to a hidden pass veiled by ancient pines, the hunter's cries faded, thwarted by the goddess's weave. Exhaustion claimed them at last, collapsing into a hollow amid the trees, where moonlight pooled like spilled mercury. Ilara's visions quieted, but the truth lingered. She was no exile, but a key, her hidden dome, the thread to bind a king's fractured realm. Yet doubt whispered, could she claim this destiny, or would it demand a price steeper than solitude? The wind softened, carrying weavos of distant kin, and in the hush, Thorn drew her close, their shared warmth a fragile ward against the coming dawn. Redemption was no gift, but a path chosen in blood and fire, and she, the pathfinder, had just stepped onto its unforgiving length. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The pass narrowed into a throat of stone and ice, where the wind's howl became a ceaseless lament, whipping snow into veils that blurred the line between earth and sky. Ilara's legs burned with the climb's toll, each step a negotiation with the treacherous ledge, her blistered feet numb yet screaming in protest. Thorn's hand anchored hers, his grip a lifeline forged in the night's revelations, but blood trailed from his fresh graze, staining the snow in erratic crimson arcs that the gusts scattered like omens. The locket swung wildly against her chest, its chain biting into her skin, the lunar crescent pulsing with erratic heat, as if the goddess herself raged against the pursuit echoing below. They crested the ridge at last, bursting into a wind-swept plateau ringed by jagged spires that clawed at the moon like desperate pleas. The air hung thick with the scent of pine resin and impending storm, the ground a treacherous mosaic of frozen crust and hidden crevasses. Ilara's visions had guided them here, the silver path coiling to this forsaken height, but now it frayed at the edges, dissolving into uncertainty under the weight of what approached. Distant torches flickered like vengeful eyes in the valley, the hunter's howls fracturing the night into shards of fury. Among them rose a deeper bellow, not beast, but command, a rival alpha's roar, laced with the metallic tang of old betrayals. Thorn halted abruptly, his body coiling like a spring despite the wounds sapping his strength. His storm-gray eyes scanned the horizon, narrowing on the figures emerging from the mist-shrouded tree line below. Kale, he growled, the name a curse carved from granite. My beta, the one who twisted mercy into treason. Guilt shadowed his features, etching deeper lines around his mouth, the melancholy of a king who had trusted too deeply now, curdling into resolve. He released Ilara's hand, stepping forward as if to shield her from the storm of his past, but she felt the fracture in him, the ethical core that had spared lives now demanding reckoning. The hunters crested the slope in a wave of fur and steel, their forms silhouetted against the moon's cold blaze, a dozen betas, flanks heaving, eyes glowing with feral hunger. At their fore loped Kale, a massive wolf with russet fur matted by snow, his muzzle scarred from battles Thorn had led them through. He shifted mid-stride, rising on hind legs into a towering alpha form, naked save for a cloak of iron-ringed leather, his chest emblazoned with the ironclad crest, a twisted mockery of loyalty. Bloodlust radiated from him, thick as the wind's chill, but beneath it lurked ambition, sharp as the dagger at his belt. Thorn, Kale snarled, his voice booming across the plateau like thunder trapped in stone. Fugitive king, hiding behind an Omega's skirts. The clans have spoken. Your hesitation ends tonight. Mercy is weakness. Blood will bind us anew. His gaze slid to Ilara, predatory and dismissive, lingering on the locket with a flicker of unease, as if sensing its otherworldly thrum. The betas fanned out, encircling the plateau in a noose of snarls and bared fangs, their breaths fogging the air in rhythmic threats. Torches sputtered in their grips, casting erratic shadows that danced like specters across the snow, illuminating the crimson blooms from Thorn's wounds. Ilara's heart thundered, the locket searing her skin like a brand, visions assaulting her anew. Forks in the path, one drenched in fire and slaughter, the other veiled in mist, leading to fragile peace. Her Omega instincts recoiled from the violence coiling in the air, the scent of aggression mingling with the metallic bite of drawn blades. Yet the gift within her stirred, demanding she choose, not flee, but confront. She stepped beside Thorn, her smaller frame dwarfed by his, but her voice cut through the wind, steady as the moon's arc. "He spared your lives once," she called to Kale, the words tasting of ash and defiance. "What honor do you claim in spilling his blood for it?" Kale's laugh was a guttural bark, echoing off the spires like shattering ice. He advanced, paws crunching snow, his betas closing ranks with low growls that vibrated through the ground. "Honor? The ironclad thrive on strength, not whispers from exiles. This Omega, your crutch, reeks of Frostfang weakness. Lyran's cast-off, they say. What paths does she see, Thorn? Illusions to soothe your guilt?" His eyes bored into hers, challenging, and the locket flared, heat blooming through her veins like liquid silver. Ilara gasped as clarity pierced the chaos. Kale's betrayal stemmed not from disdain, but fear, of Thorn's mercy inspiring the clans to question the old ways, to choose compassion over conquest. Thorn's fists clenched, the wind tearing at his cloak, revealing the scars of past wars etched across his torso like a map of regrets. Guilt warred in his eyes, the ethical king confronting the monster his hesitation had birthed. "I led us through the long winter," he roared, voice raw against the gale. "Not for glory, but survival. You twist my mercy into chains, Kale, but the goddess sees true strength, in forgiveness, not the blade." He lunged forward, intercepting Kale's charge, their bodies colliding in a clash of muscle and fury. Claws raked fur, blood sprayed in hot arcs that steamed on the snow, the plateau erupting into visceral chaos. Betas lunged, Thorn's form a blur of defensive strikes, his wounds reopening in crimson rivulets that painted the white ground red. Ilara staggered back, the locket's pulse syncing with the battle's rhythm, her visions fracturing into dilemmas. Intervene with her gift, reveal the hidden escape and abandon vengeance, or let Thorn's past consume him in war's maw. A beta lunged at her, fangs bared, and she dodged, the snow yielding under her as the silver path flickered. A narrow fissure in the spire, unseen by all but her. Freedom beckoned, a solitary flight into the storm, leaving Thorn to his fate. But his cry of pain, as Kale's claws gashed his shoulder, rooted her. Love or liberty? The question clawed at her soul, deeper than any wound. She had been rejected for her visions, cast into exile for seeing truths others buried. To run now would affirm that weakness. To stay, to guide him through this judgment, demanded faith in redemption's fragile thread. The locket burned like a forge, and Ilara screamed, "Thorn! The path! Left! Through the stone!" Her voice pierced the fray, a beacon amid the snarls and clashes. He twisted, gray eyes meeting hers across the bloodied snow, understanding dawning like moonlight on frost. With a surge of alpha fire, he broke from Kyle, barreling toward her as betas swarmed. She pointed to the fissure, her hand outstretched, and he grasped it, pulling her into the crevice as claws scraped stone inches behind. The world narrowed to darkness and echo, the battle's roar muffled to a distant thunder, their bodies pressed close in the tight passage, breaths mingling in the pitch. They emerged onto a hidden ledge overlooking the plateau, the wind's howl a veil concealing their perch. Below, Kale's forces milled in confusion, torches waving like lost souls, his bellows of rage carrying on the gusts. Thorn slumped against her, blood warm on her skin. his body trembling not from cold, but the moral precipice they teetered upon. "You chose me," he whispered, voice hoarse, guilt and gratitude intertwining like vines. "Over freedom. Why?" Alara touched his face, fingers tracing the fresh gashes, the locket cooling against her chest like a sated flame. Tears froze on her lashes, the moon witnessing their fragile victory. "Because redemption isn't won alone," she murmured, the words of philosophy etched in her bones. "War would claim us both. Your guilt, my exile, forgiveness. It's the true judgment." Yet doubt lingered, a spiritual thorn. Could they outrun the past, or would Kale's shadow demand a steeper price? The wind carried faint howls, pursuit unrelenting, and in the hush between beats, Alara wondered if love's choice was mercy or the forge of greater sacrifice. The plateau below smoldered with spilled blood, a canvas of choices yet to fully unfold under the moon's unblinking gaze. The ledge cradled them like a precarious throne, its icy lip jutting over the plateau where blood had painted the snow in abstract fury, now hardening into crimson crust under the moon's waning gaze. Alara's body ached from the flight through stone, her limbs heavy with the residue of visions that had both saved and condemned them. The locket's chain a raw line across her collarbone, its lunar crescent dulled to a somber glow as if mourning the violence below. Thorn leaned against her, his weight a testament to the toll of the confrontation. Fresh gashes weeping blood that soaked her cloak, warm and sticky against her side. The wind whispered through the spires, carrying the acrid tang of scorched fur and the fading snarls of Kyle's pack, their torches sputtering like defeated stars in the valley's maw. She pressed her palm to his newest wound, the one across his shoulder where Kyle's claws had claimed their mark, feeling the ragged rhythm of his pulse beneath torn flesh. Healing touch was no Omega's gift in the old tales. Only the Pathfinder's sight pierced veils. But in this moment, her fingers trembled with an instinctive mercy, staunching the flow as best she could with strips torn from her hem. Thorn's breath hitched, not from pain alone, but from the intimacy of her care, his storm-gray eyes lifting to meet hers, shadowed by the guilt that had shadowed him since the long winter. "Ilara," he murmured, voice frayed like wind-torn banners. "You pulled me from the abyss. But this, my blood on your hands, what have I dragged you into?" The question hung between them, heavier than the snow-laden air, stirring the hollow in her chest where Liran's rejection had festered like an untreated scar. She had chosen him over the silver path's solitary whisper, forgiveness over the blade's easy justice, yet doubt coiled in her gut, cold as the stone beneath them. The locket warmed faintly, a reminder of bonds forged and broken, its inner lock of silver fur now feeling like a bridge to this new unraveling. Below, Kale's howls rallied his betas, their forms milling in frustrated circles. The plateau a battlefield of trampled white and scattered embers from fallen torches, fire's fleeting defiance against the night's dominion. Pursuit would come again, relentless as the tide, demanding a reckoning that mercy alone might not sate. Alara's visions flickered at the edges of her mind, unbidden now, not paths of escape, but a convergence, a fiery throne not of conquest, but union, where blood and snow melted into fertile earth under lunar blessing. Her hand stilled on his wound, fingers tracing the scar's edge, and Thorn shuddered, knees buckling anew as her touch ignited that profound pull, the instinctive bond they had resisted in the cave's hush now surging like a river thawed by spring. He caught her wrist gently, not to stop her, but to hold the moment. His calloused thumb brushing the ritual scar Liran had left, a mark of exile now reframed in the moon's silver light. "I was blind," he confessed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones, melancholy threading each word like veins of ore in stone. "A king who spared lives, yet condemned my own soul to chains of duty. Your sight frees what guilt bound, But the clans fracture without a firm hand. If I return, war claims us all, or I sacrifice the crown, wander as you did, broken and alone. The wind howled sharper, gusts laden with the scent of approaching storm, snowflakes spiraling like omens from the spires above. Alara's heart clenched, the Omega in her yearning for the den's warmth, for a union that transcended hierarchies, yet rationalized the peril. Love was no balm for a realm teetering on betrayal's edge. She had been reborn in exile's forge, her hidden gift no curse but a call to heal wounds deeper than flesh. Leaning into him, she felt the heat of his body against the unrelenting cold, their scents mingling, wild honey and pine smoke, blood and frost, a symphony of redemption's raw edge. Sacrifice isn't loss, she whispered, her breath fogging between them, lips brushing his ear in the intimacy of the ledge. It's the choice that births strength, not power's iron grip, but compassion's quiet fire. We've both bled for others' fears, Liren's court, your counsel. Together, we rewrite the oath. Thorn's eyes searched hers, the guilt fracturing like thin ice under her words. Revelation dawning in their depths. He pulled her closer, his uninjured arm encircling her waist, the locket pressing between them like a shared heartbeat. The moon crested the ridge, bathing the plateau in ethereal silver, and as if summoned, a lone Weevo rose from the valley. Not Kale's rage, but a chorus of wild wolves, their ethereal forms materializing at the vision's fringe. Guardians with eyes like captured moonlight, flanking a path that wound upward, not in flight, but return. Alara's gift surged, clarity flooding her. The silver trail led back to the clan's heart, through the storm, where Thorn could claim his throne not as tyrant, but redeemer, her at his side as pathfinder, weaving mercy into the ironclad's iron laws. Kale's pack stirred below, sense of confusion rippling on the wind, their alpha's bellow faltering as the wolves' howls drowned his command. Betrayal's grip loosened, the betas shifting uneasily, whispers of doubt seeding the ranks. Thorn's mercy, once mocked, now echoed in the night's spiritual verdict. He rose with her, wounds staunched by her touch and will, his frame straightening as the bond sealed, resisted no more. An alpha's fire tempered by an omega's grace, love accepted as the ultimate proof. They descended the path together, hand in hand, the snow yielding under their steps like penance forgiven, blood trails fading into the white as the first hints of dawn gilded the peaks. The clan's distant fires beckoned, not as beacons of war, but hearths of rebirth. Ilara felt the locket cool to a steady warmth, its crescent a symbol no longer of broken vows, but woven fates. In Thorn's gaze, she saw her reflection, not the rejected shadow, but a queen in exile's robes, her rebirth etched in the union they forged. Yet the journey's end whispered a deeper truth. Redemption demanded ongoing sacrifice, compassion's flame ever tested by the world's gales. Under the moon's approving arc, they stepped into the unfolding dawn, two souls mended in blood and fire, destiny claimed not as reward, but as the hard-won dance of healing hearts. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.